I never thought I'd be the kind of man who would orchestrate revenge. But life has a way of changing you. I used to believe in love, trust, and the sanctity of marriage. That was before Sarah changed, before her twin sister Victoria came back into our lives. I remember the exact moment when I first noticed something was different. It was a Tuesday evening in September, and Sarah was checking her phone. She laughed, not her usual warm chuckle, but a sound I'd never heard before. Sharp, almost wicked. When I asked what was funny, she just shook her head and said, "Nothing, Michael." But her eyes never left the screen. That was the beginning. Sarah and I had built what I thought was a perfect life in suburban Chicago. I worked as a financial advisor, made good money, and we had a beautiful home in Lake Forest. We weren't flashy people, but we were comfortable. Happy, I thought. Then Victoria showed up, fresh from her divorce in Los Angeles. She swept into our lives like a hurricane in designer clothes. Victoria had always been Sarah's opposite. Wild where Sarah was calm, reckless where Sarah was careful. But now she seemed different, more polished, more dangerous. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had mastered the art of taking what they wanted. "Oh, Michael," she'd say, examining our home with barely concealed disdain. "Don't you think Sarah deserves more than this?" She'd gesture vaguely at our comfortable living room, as if our leather couches and family photos were somehow offensive. Sarah used to defend our lifestyle. She'd roll her eyes at Victoria's dramatic size and pointed comments. But something changed when Victoria showed her the Instagram lifestyle she'd built. Yacht parties in Marina del Rey, VIP sections at exclusive clubs, designer shopping sprees documented in perfect lighting. "Life's too short to play it safe," Victoria would say, scrolling through her feed. "You're only young once, Sarah." I watched as my wife's eyes grew wider with each swipe. The transformation was subtle at first. Sarah started buying new clothes, not her usual classic pieces, but trendy items that seemed designed more for photos than real life. She changed her hair, highlighting it to match Victoria's perfect blonde. Then came the late nights. "Just sister time," she'd say, not meeting my eyes. "Vicky knows all the best places." I'd wake up at 2 a.m. to the sound of giggling in our driveway. The sisters stumbling in, reeking of expensive champagne and secrets. When I'd express concern, they'd exchange looks. Those looks killed me, like I was some pathetic, controlling husband who didn't understand the modern world. "Michael, honey," Sarah would say, her voice dripping with condescension. "You don't expect me to just sit at home all the time, do you?" Victoria would smirk behind her. "Yeah, Michael. Women have lives now. Welcome to 2023. The worst part wasn't the late nights or the changing clothes. It was watching the woman I loved slowly disappear. The Sarah I married used to curl up with me on Sunday mornings. We'd drink coffee and plan our future. Talk about starting a family. Now she spends Sundays recovering from Saturday nights. Or worse, planning the next big adventure with Victoria. The sisters started documenting everything on social media. Their matching outfits, their synchronized dance moves, their perfectly staged photos. I became the unwitting background character in their story. The boring husband who just didn't get it. Sometimes they'd film TikToks in our kitchen. I'd hear them laughing about basic husbands who thought a nice dinner at Capitol Grill was living large. "You should see the men at Le Rouge," Victoria would say. "Now those are real men who know how to treat a woman." Sarah would giggle, and my stomach would clench. Le Rouge was their new favorite spot, an exclusive club in downtown Chicago where the rich and beautiful gathered, where bottle service started at 4 figures, where, according to their not-so-subtle hints, the men were everything I wasn't. My colleagues started giving me strange looks at work. One day, Brad from accounting pulled me aside. "Hey man, you might want to check Sarah's Instagram stories." There was my wife, dancing on a table at Le Rouge. Victoria right beside her. Both of them surrounded by men in expensive suits. The caption read, "Living my best life while hubby watches Netflix." The comments were worse. Girl, you need an upgrade. Those Latin guys, though, fire. Who needs Netflix and chill when you can have champagne and thrill? And Sarah had liked every single comment. I tried talking to her one night, after Victoria had finally gone home. What happened to us? I asked. What happened to our plans? Sarah looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Plans? She laughed. Michael, those weren't plans. That was a prison sentence. We talked about having kids. I reminded her. A family. God. She rolled her eyes. Can you imagine anything more boring? That's when I knew. The Sarah I married was gone. In her place was this stranger. This woman who looked at our life, the life we'd built together, with contempt, who saw me as nothing more than a punchline in her sister's grand narrative. I started drinking more, not at bars or clubs, just at home, alone, scrolling through old photos on my phone. Photos of Sarah smiling, really smiling, not the practiced pout she wore now. Photos of us traveling, exploring, building our life together. I wondered where that woman had gone, if she was still in there somewhere. But then I'd hear her laugh with Victoria, that new, sharp laugh that cut like glass. And I knew she wasn't coming back. The final straw came during one of their infamous sister nights. They came home at 3 a.m., louder than usual. I was sitting in the dark living room, nursing a bourbon. Oh, look, Victoria announced. The warden's still up. Sarah dissolved into giggles. Baby, you didn't have to wait up. Her voice was thick with fake concern and real mockery. I was worried, I said. You didn't answer my texts. Victoria made a whipping sound. God, Michael, could you be any more pathetic? Sarah didn't defend me. She just stood there, swaying slightly in her too tight dress. You know what your problem is? Victoria continued. You think you can control her. I don't want to control anyone, I said. I just want my wife back. They both laughed at that. The sound echoed off our high ceilings. Your wife. Victoria sneered. Sarah's not your possession, Michael. She's a queen who deserves to be treated like one. Sarah nodded, her eyes glazed but hard. You should see how the men at Le Rouge treat us, she said. Like goddesses. Not like some boring suburban trophy to keep on a shelf. The words hit me like physical blows. But it was what came next that broke me. Remember that guy tonight? Victoria asked Sarah. Marco? Sarah's face lit up. Oh my God, yes. The way he danced. The way he looked at you. They dissolved into meaningful giggles. I sat there, invisible in my own home, listening to my wife and her sister talk about another man, watching them exchange looks that said everything they weren't saying out loud. That's when something inside me snapped, not in a violent way, more like a quiet realization, a understanding that all of this, had to end, but not the way they expected. Not with me walking away with my tail between my legs, not with them winning. I took another sip of bourbon. Let them laugh. Let them think they had all the power. I was done being the punchline. It was time to write a different kind of story, one where the boring husband finally got his due, one where the queens of social media learned that actions have consequences. I just needed to figure out how. That night, as Sarah slept off her champagne beside me, I opened my laptop and started searching. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew it had to be something big, something that would match the scale of their betrayal, something that would make them understand what it felt like to lose control. Little did I know, the answer was just a few clicks away, in the darkest corners of the internet, where men like me, men who'd been pushed too far, found solutions, where revenge wasn't just a fantasy, but a service that could be bought, if you knew where to look, and had nothing left to lose. The internet is a strange place after midnight, especially when you're 3 bourbons in. That's when I found him, Ricardo Herrera. His profile was buried deep in forums I never knew existed, places where the wealthy and dangerous conducted their business. At first glance, his website looked legitimate. The Blue Paradise R, the exclusive clientele, I let them discover Ricardo's Instagram, his carefully curated feed of beautiful people, luxury cars, private jets, celebrity guests. They took the bait. Maybe Miami wouldn't be so bad, Sarah mused. For the right resort. Victoria was already scrolling through Ricardo's photos. These parties look insane. And that owner, damn. I played my part perfectly. The trying husband, willing to spend whatever it took to save his marriage. They thought they were playing me. Let me make the reservations. Let me book the flights. All while exchanging knowing looks, planning their own adventures. I even heard them late one night, giggling about the men they'd meet, the fun they'd have. Poor Michael, Victoria said, thinks this trip will fix everything. Let him think that, Sarah replied. At least we get a free vacation. The weeks leading up to the trip were torture. Watching them shop for new swimsuits, hearing them plan their activities. But I kept my face neutral, played the hopeful husband. Even Tom played his part, acting angry when Victoria announced the trip, making hollow threats about alimony. The morning we left for Miami was sunny, perfect flying weather. Sarah and Victoria were giddy with excitement. Designer luggage packed with new outfits, matching sunglasses perched on their heads. They barely noticed my silence on the flight, too busy planning their first Instagram posts. Ricardo met us at the airport himself, tall, dark, and dangerous in a white linen suit. The sisters were instantly captivated. He kissed their hands, called them Ms. Reynas, my queens, had a Rolls-Royce waiting to take us to the resort. The blue paradise was everything the photos promised, and more. Infinity pools that seemed to merge with the ocean, suites bigger than our house, staff that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. The sisters were in heaven. Ricardo was the perfect host, charming, attentive, mysterious. He gave them a private tour, while I handled the paperwork. By dinner, they'd forgotten I existed, too entranced by Ricardo's world, his stories, his promises. When he presented the VIP membership contracts, they signed without reading, too eager to join his exclusive circle. I watched their pens scratch the paper, felt a chill despite the Miami heat. It was done. That night, I lay awake in our suite, listening to Sarah and Victoria plan their week, their month, their new life. They had no idea. The contracts they'd signed weren't just for VIP access. They were carefully worded agreements, giving Ricardo complete control over their stay, their movements, their lives. For the next year, I should have felt guilty, should have stopped it. But then Sarah turned to me with that new, sharp smile. Michael, darling, why don't you go explore the city tomorrow? Vicky and I have plans. That familiar giggle, that contempt too, us glance. And I knew I'd made the right choice. Tomorrow, I'd fly home alone, leave them to their paradise, their adventure, their cage, and start building something new from the ashes of what they destroyed. The flight home was the longest 4 hours of my life, not because I felt guilty, but because I couldn't stop thinking about what came next. Ricardo had been clear about the timeline. Give me 2 weeks, he'd said. By then, they'll understand their new reality. I'd left them at breakfast that morning. They barely noticed me go, too busy planning their day with Ricardo, too excited about the yacht party he'd mentioned. Now, somewhere below me, they were probably still celebrating, still thinking they were in control, still believing this was their choice. I landed in Chicago as a different man. The first thing I did was call Tom. It's done, I said. They're in Miami. For how long? A year. His breath caught. A whole year. That's what we paid for. We met at his lawyer's office the next day, a sleek downtown firm specializing in high net worth divorces. The lawyer, Jessica Martinez, didn't blink at our story. So your wives are on an extended vacation? Something like that, Tom said. She nodded. All business. And you want to protect your assets while they're gone. Everything, I said. We want everything locked down. Jessica laid out the plan. We'd document their abandonment. Their social media posts would be evidence. Their signed resort contracts, too. They chose to leave, she explained. That's all the courts need to know. We spent the next week moving fast, transferring accounts, liquidating joint assets, converting cash to cryptocurrency. They'll try to fight back, Jessica warned, when they realize what's happening. They won't have a chance, Tom said. He was right. Ricardo's resort had a strict phone policy. For privacy, he'd explained to the sisters. They'd surrendered their phones that first night, given resort-approved ones instead, with limited access, monitored communications. By the time they realized something was wrong, it would be too late. The first message came 3 days after I left. A casual text from Sarah. Having an amazing time. Ricardo is taking us to South Beach tonight. I didn't respond. The next day, Michael, are you getting these? Then silence for 2 days. When Sarah's message finally came, it was different. Something's wrong with our phones. Can't make outside calls. Ricardo says it's a system issue. I could imagine her frustration, her growing unease, the way Victoria would try to brush it off. It's just resort policy, she'd say, for exclusivity. But then their resort-approved phones went dark too. Complete communication blackout. Ricardo's next phase beginning. I got updates from him weekly. Brief, professional reports. The ladies are adjusting, he wrote. So, me resistance, as expected. But they're learning. I didn't ask for details. Didn't want to know exactly what learning meant. Just focused on my part of the plan. Tom and I worked methodically, following Jessica's advice, documenting everything, the sisters' social media history, their bank records, their pattern of behavior, building a case for abandonment, emotional cruelty, breach of marriage contract. The courts will see 2 women, Jessica explained, who chose luxury over their marriages, who went to Miami to live their dreams, and left their responsibilities behind. Meanwhile, life went on. I threw myself into work, started going to the gym again, reconnected with old friends. People noticed a change in me. You seem different, they'd say. Lighter somehow. They didn't know about Miami, about Ricardo, about the plan. They just saw a man rebuilding his life. Tom changed too. Started a new business. Moved to a better apartment. Finally stopped looking over his shoulder, waiting for Victoria's next attack. Months passed. Seasons changed. Chicago's summer faded to fall. Then winter. Then spring. The divorce proceedings moved forward. Unopposed. The sisters couldn't contest what they didn't know about. Couldn't fight back from their gilded cage. Ricardo sent occasional photos. Sarah and Victoria at resort events. Their smiles a bit strained. Their eyes a bit haunted. Their designer clothes and perfect makeup. Couldn't hide the truth. They weren't queens anymore. They were inventory. Expensive decorations. For Ricardo's exclusive parties. Sometimes I wondered if I'd gone too far. If there had been another way. But then I'd remember their laughter. Their mockery. Their casual cruelty. And the doubt would fade. They'd chosen this path. Every step of the way. From the first time they sneered at our life, to the moment they signed Ricardo's contracts. They'd been so eager to escape, so ready to trade stability for excitement. Now they had exactly what they wanted. Luxury without limits. Parties without end. Adventure without escape. Tom and I met for drinks sometimes. Watching sports at quiet bars. Trading stories about our new lives. Never discussing Miami. Never mentioning the sisters. Until one day, Tom asked the question, "Do you think they've learned anything?" I took a long sip of beer. Thought about Ricardo's last update. About the changes he described. They're learning, I said, whether they want to or not. Tom nodded, understanding. We'd both seen the transformation coming. Known it was inevitable. When you cage butterflies, they eventually forget how to fly. The year was almost up now. Soon, Ricardo would release them. send them home to their new reality, to empty houses, empty accounts, empty lives. They'd find divorce papers waiting, properties sold, assets moved, their social media empires in ruins. They'd try to GHD it probably, hire lawyers, make threats, but the evidence would be clear. They'd abandoned their marriages, chosen a year of luxury over their vows. The courts would see it our way, and Tom and I, we'd be long gone, starting fresh, living the lives we'd rebuilt, while they learned the hardest lesson, that freedom isn't about escape. It's about choices, and every choice has a price, even in paradise. The day they were scheduled to return, I didn't go to the airport. Neither did Tom. We watched from a distance, through the updates from our lawyers. The sisters landed in Chicago on a sunny June morning, a year older, a lifetime wiser. Their designer luggage replaced with basic suitcases. Their confident strut reduced to careful steps. Ricardo had kept his word. They were physically unharmed, but changed, fundamentally changed. The first blow hit when they tried to go home. Sarah's key didn't work in our door. Victoria's condo had new owners. Their phones were disconnected. Credit cards declined. Bank accounts emptied. The life they'd left behind had disappeared completely. I watched through security cameras as Sarah stood on our former doorstep, crying, screaming, finally understanding. Victoria wasn't handling it any better. She'd gone straight to her old condo, only to find a young family living there. Their lawyers found them at a cheap hotel, delivered the divorce papers, the court documents, the evidence, everything laid out in black and white. Their year of abandonment, their social media mockery, their signed contracts with Ricardo. They tried to fight back, of course, hired expensive lawyers with borrowed money, claimed they'd been tricked, trapped, held against their will. But Ricardo's contracts were ironclad. They'd signed voluntarily, agreed to everything. The court saw what we wanted them to see. Two wealthy women who'd chosen adventure over marriage, who'd spent a year at a luxury resort, while their husbands waited at home. The judges had no sympathy, especially when our lawyers presented the evidence. Their social media posts mocking their marriages. Their recorded conversations about upgrading to better men. The video clips of them laughing about their boring husbands. It was over before it really began. The divorces were finalized quickly. Assets divided, or rather, confirmed as already divided. They got nothing. We made sure of that. I heard through mutual friends how they struggled to rebuild. Victoria's Instagram influence had vanished. A year offline had killed her following. Sarah's job had been filled. Her professional contacts moved on. They tried reaching out to their old friends, but money talks in their social circle, and they had none left. No one wanted to associate with fallen queens. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that year in Miami. Wonder what really happened at that resort. Ricardo and Ver gave us details, just results. But I saw the change in their eyes. In recent photos, the haunted look, the careful way they carried themselves, like women who'd learned hard lessons about power, control, and consequences. Tom and I met one last time, before I left Chicago for good. We sat at our usual bar, watching a Cubs game. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. I thought about Sarah's last Instagram post, before Miami, her caption mocking our marriage, the laughing emojis, the cruel comments. No, I said honestly. They made their choice. We just helped them live with it. Tom nodded, understanding. We'd both lost our wives long before Miami. Lost them to greed, to social media fame, to the endless pursuit of more. Ricardo had just helped us make it official, give them what they thought they wanted, until they realized what they'd lost. I moved to Seattle the next week, started fresh. New job, new home, new life. I heard Sarah and Victoria moved to Phoenix, trying to rebuild their lives, away from the memories, the whispers, the knowing looks. Sometimes I wonder if they ever realized the full truth of what happened, how their paradise became their prison, how their quest for excitement led them straight into a trap. But then I remember their laughter, their cruelty, their casual dismissal of the lives we'd built. And I know they learned exactly what they needed to. That actions have consequences, that freedom has a price, that sometimes the cage you choose is worse than the life you leave behind. Tom called me recently. Victoria had tried reaching out, begging for another chance, promising she'd changed. "What did you say?" I asked. He laughed, but it wasn't cruel, just tired. I said goodbye. That's all any of us can say now. Goodbye to the past, to the pain, to the people who thought they could hurt us without consequences. I started dating again, met someone new, someone real, who doesn't need filters or followers to feel valuable. She asked about Sarah once. I told her the simple truth. She chose a different path. It led her somewhere she didn't expect. That's all anyone needs to know. The rest is just details. Locked away in Miami, in Ricardo's resort, in the year that changed everything. Some people might call what we did cruel. Maybe it was. But sometimes, cruelty is just justice. Wearing a different name, and paradise is just another word for prison when you're not free to leave. And